Boneless Comic Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the fastest podcast alive. We were in an accident with lightning bolts and chemicals, and now we run at super speed. And that is us here with our after show.
And we have to do this for the entire after show, so it's going to be a short one. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
I think I would be very exhausted if
And
I
notice
did.
that we were not running in slow motion.
No, we were not. The only time that looked good was in the moment in Zack Snyder's Justice League when he runs back through time to keep Superman and Cyborg from dying. That moment looks really cool. But all the other times where they have him like doing the weird, like, I don't know, like, why did they tell him to run like that? Or why did they let him do that, I guess, is the
I
question.
don't know. It didn't bug me as much in Justice League, but it really bugged me in the Flash movie. Like, especially because they really upped the graphics to show him traveling at just this like incredible speed with all these streaks going by, and you can see the city perspective and all of this stuff, and you're like, wow, this is, cool, and it's a different way to show, Barry running at super speed. And then you see Ezra Miller just blah, 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 and I'm like, oh my gosh, it does not fit. It does not match at all.
No, you definitely want to see him running really fast. I've had basically
on your left
the whole like ending montage thing spoiled because I've seen the really bad CGI Nicolas Cage and the really bad CGI Henry Cavill, and it looked like Henry Cavill was like busting through something with no shirt on, except it was really, really fake. I don't know. I've seen like stills of that, and I'm just like, oh man, like, why does it look so bad? And now this week we find out that the visual effects artists at Marvel have actually unionized. So that's a thing that's happening. Both The Flash and Ant-Man Quantumania were at the center of visual effects controversies because basically they get paid the same for a shot where they remove a wire as they do for a shot where they have to generate the speed force and create an entire 3D model of a person and do all of these other things. And so that's obviously not conducive to a healthy work environment. So we end up with stuff like this. So the director of the Flash movie, though, has gone on record as saying the effects were supposed to look fake because the speed force is a different dimension, which sounds like a bunch of bull. Basically, I don't think that's true at all. So
so there were a mix of some effects that actually did look really good and some effects that looked absolutely horrible to the point of like the blue screen was bad, or green screen now. Like, okay, in 2023, if you are shooting anything and your green screen looks bad, I mean, I have a green screen and I could make it look way better than they did. The lighting was off, and it just like you could tell that they were in front of a green screen like really bad. And that's just, there's no excuse for that in a superhero movie. This was the 13th DCEU film, I think. And it's like at this point, green screen is like, that should be a no-brainer. But I mean, there were scenes where that was bad. And then there were scenes where it was really good. There were scenes where the CG was really good. And like with Supergirl fighting, there were some scenes where like they were actually her and they weren't a rubber person. And then they did a slow-mo scene where she was a rubber person. And then they went back to the fast motion and then it was actually her. And I was like, okay, you guys have done stuff that looks good in this movie. Do more of that and less of the really bad stuff. Like, it's so obvious. It's again, like the Matrix Reloaded. It's like, we have this cool action scene, and then all of a sudden we have a really bad video game, and it's so obvious. It's like a switch was flipped, and it went from bad, or it went from good to horrible, and then it goes back to good, and it's like, just cut that part out. That's it.
It just destroys your immersion when you're trying to enjoy something like that. I will say, in talking about the Flash in media kind of at large, reading this comic book really made me go, wow, the comic book writers are a lot better than the people they've been hiring for TV and movies, because that story was like really engaging. It really had me caring about the character. And while I really did enjoy The Flash on the CW for about the first, I don't know, like 4 seasons or so, it started to really go downhill. And I don't know, I got to a point where I was just like, I don't care anymore. Like, I don't think I'm going to watch this because it's not really doing anything for me. And even there, it seemed like their effects budget was actually getting like worse and not better, which I don't understand. When you have like a successful network show that keeps going, don't you get more money every season? I thought that was how that worked, but
I don't know.
yeah, I don't know. But yeah, it's I don't know. The comic was just really well written. That really kind of pulled it into focus for me, like how far they have to go with some of these adaptations as far as like getting the characters right. And it's really that like heart of the character, right? That like you have to care about this person as a person, not just because they're fast and they have superpowers, but you have to like actually care about the struggle that they're going through. And like what is it that makes them a hero? It's not the superpowers, it's like who they are. So
Yeah.
I think that they early on in the Flash show on the CW were able to kind of get to that, but I think the longer it went, they were kind of just reiterating the same story points over and over. And kind of like you had with the Arrow show, where it's like, now Felicity is with Oliver, and now she's not with Oliver, and now he's gonna kill people, and now he's not gonna kill people. It kind of seemed like with Barry, the thing was like, well, I'm just gonna go deal
Do
with
it on
this
my
alone
own.
because my
Yeah.
friends can't. I don't want to put my friends in danger. And then they're like, no, but we're your friends and we want to be there for you. And I'm like, all right, how many times?
Okay, guys, you convinced me. We're a team.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah.
It's like, how many times like at a certain point Barry looks like an idiot, for being like that. So I mean, it's
Yeah.
just it's not good on a consistent basis. And what makes it worse, viewing it through this lens, is that comic books, just like TV, are serialized storytelling. So what that means is it's completely possible to do serialized storytelling and not keep repeating the same story points because they've done it in comic books. So
Longer.
yeah, much longer. I mean, we said Wally West came out like in the late 50s. So he was
Yeah.
only 4 years after Barry Allen was introduced. And I mean, his character has had phenomenal growth since the point he was Kid Flash and sort of like a founding member of the Teen Titans and all that stuff. Like now he's his own hero and he is the Flash.
But
Yeah,
even
so
so,
I don't know.
like, even so, like comics, I mean, they do repeat things, and there
They
are a
do.
lot of like events that are very similar, or we just bring back that
Mm,
event because it was so popular when it came out that we're going to
right.
try it again. So they still do bring things back, but it seems like it's so much longer. Like in a
Hmm.
TV show, it seems like we're bringing things back after a season or two, whereas in
Yeah.
comics, it's like, okay, after 10 or 20 years, now we're repeating this thing again. Like, okay, well, at least we had a good, 10 years of comics
Right.
to draw
Right.
from where we didn't do that. So
Yeah,
it seems more
there was a
unforgivable.
significant there was a significant amount of time between Civil War and Civil War II, for instance. Or
Mhm.
I think occasionally you'll have an event. DC did one called Dark Knight's Metal, and then that sold really well, and so they had Death Metal like 2 years later. That was too soon,
Yeah.
because by the time that was over, I was like, I am worn out. This is too many tie-ins. It's too similar to the last event, and I'm over it. So yeah, there's definitely an ability to wear out ideas when you keep recycling them close together. But yeah, I think if you stretch it out over a long enough timeline, and that's something that comics are uniquely positioned to do because they don't ever stop. They just keep going
Yeah.
years and years and years. Whereas, TV show, you're really lucky to get 4 seasons these days out of a TV show, if not 3, especially if you're on Netflix. Like it seems like 3 seasons is they're like, all right, you're canceled. But 3 billion people watched it. I know you're canceled. We need a tax write-off. So
Except for
sorry,
Stranger
guys.
Things that like is going to
Yes.
have a season, I think 5 now, and it's like, okay,
Yeah,
I didn't know how they were going to do a season 2 after the first one,
I
but it was pretty
know.
good. It worked. And then season 3, all right, cool. And then season 4, it was like, all right, this is like it's still interesting, but I'm kind of feeling the like slowly, okay, everybody's getting really
Yeah.
old and growing up, and it's just the magic is
It's
kind of like, and now we have to introduce a new villain. Oh, but by the way, we retconned him into continuity. He's been here the whole time. And it's like, okay, come on. Don't ruin it by making it go
yeah.
on for too long.
Yeah, that is one of those things where, it's really nice to Katie and I have been watching The Good Place, which is a comedy about these people that are dead, and they think they're in heaven or the good place, but they're actually not. And so
Yikes.
that's the twist. But the guy that's like set up the neighborhood or the environment that they live in is Ted Danson from Cheers,
Oh, wow.
is the guy that's like supposedly torturing them. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens, but it's a very satisfying story that they told over 4 seasons, and then it's over, and they're not going to drag it out too long. And it's so nice to watch something that was supposed to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then just have it end, as opposed to like, let's drag it out forever. And I feel like especially The Flash and especially Arrow, which were the two biggest shows on the CW, they dragged their stuff out way too long, where they really should have just ended on a high note and been like, okay, maybe let's explore another hero at this point. And I think
Yeah.
maybe my TV superhero fatigue wouldn't have happened either if they had kind of, let that character go, and now we're going to be on to something else, So
Well, especially because that's kind of what DC does is we have the legacy character and they pass it on
yeah.
and that sort of thing. But and especially too because like the TV shows on the CW, they weren't perfect, but they were a lot better than, kind of some of the stuff we got in the, the movie
Oh
that we
yeah.
had. So it was like, well, the movies are still having problems, but at least I have this nice TV show to watch. But then it just like, and we had other things like Black Lightning, and there was a couple other shows that they introduced as well. And at that point, the same thing, I had kind of lost interest with the first
Yeah.
couple shows. And so then after that, I was like, I don't even want to try a new show at this point because I'm kind of done with it.
It's just too much.
But you also get like a lot of repeats of stories because it's like, oh, Flashpoint, like that's the big Flash story. So we have an animated movie about Flashpoint, and then the Flash TV show has to do Flashpoint, and then we have a movie about the Flash. Oh, we have to do a rip on Flashpoint, and so it's like, okay, we get Flashpoint. Like, can we do something else, please?
Right.
But at least in the movie's defense, it actually like development and production of this movie spanned like all 9 seasons of the Flash TV series.
Oh my
because it
God.
was just stuck for so long. So I kind of, don't dock them so much for that idea because at the time it was probably a good idea. But then once you're committed to it, you can't exactly say, let's abandon this and do something else. But I mean, they did take an interesting take on it. Sort of like the butterfly effect kind of thing with, how he goes to resolve, Flashpoint being about Barry trying to save his mother. So the way they go about it's a little bit interesting. There's a really big plot hole that I really think is a plot hole and not something that I missed, but I can't talk about it because it's a spoiler.
Oh, wow.
But the first maybe third or maybe quarter of the movie is kind of like what you expect from the trailers. It's like, okay,
I see.
bad CG, like the intro scene where they show Barry doing what Barry does as the Flash is really, really bad. Like if you can get past that, then the movie gets better. And
okay.
Unfortunately, they spoiled in the trailers that Michael Keaton was coming back as Batman, which they really shouldn't have. But if nothing else, watch this movie for Michael Keaton as Batman.
Okay.
Like that alone was like, as soon as he was on screen, the movie just got instantly better. And then they actually started to have kind of a decent story of like, okay, this is starting to go somewhere. Okay, now it's about the Flash and, what he's doing. And there's some character, stuff going on with him. And it got interesting from there. And then it was just like on and off CG, like really like, this is pretty good CG. This is really horrible, awful, bad CG. This is pretty good. This is pretty bad. This is good. Just like back and forth through the rest of the movie. So it definitely, like, it almost felt like it was different creative teams or something, where it was like people were making decisions that were really like, this is bad. And then whoever was like directing and filming Batman was a freaking genius. Like the music cues that were going on, the way that he like did the kind of like 80s 90s where he like pulls out a batarang or whatever and he goes, and the camera like gives you this weird perspective when his hand comes out, and like it was all of the camera shots and angles and everything for
that's
Batman that you
great.
would expect from like that era. And I was like, this is great. Like, what the heck have we been doing the rest of the movie? Like,
well, Andy
it's
Muschietti,
so confusing.
who directed that, is directing the Batman the Brave and the Bold movie that's going to be part of James Gunn's movie universe. So he will be the Batman director for the first Batman movie as part of that. Although that movie is going to introduce Damian as Robin. So it's going to be very different from everything else, which I actually think is smart. I think it's good for them to do something that's drastically different than what we've seen with Batman.
We have all these characters like in the Bat family. Like, let's
there really are a lot. Like I've said it many times, but the Bat family is way more interesting to me than Batman himself, because Batman can't change. The whole point of his character is that he basically can't have character development, because then he stops being Batman. So everybody else around him is more interesting because they're allowed to actually go through things. But Bruce is always going to come back to that promise that he made as a little boy and keep continuing his crusade, you know? So it's just like, I don't know. He's a great character, but the fact that he doesn't have the capacity for any kind of real growth kind of makes him less exciting to me than everyone else around him.
Well, and even if he could grow, like, we can't get there in the cinematic universe. Like, how many actors have we had that have played Batman? Oh my gosh. At this point, can't we just go, you know what? We've had so many people play Batman. There are multiple generations of children who've grown up with a Batman. Can we maybe move on to other Bat-related characters? And they did try to have Batgirl and Robin in the 90s, but that was with George Clooney, and that was really bad. And maybe they're shy from bringing those characters back. I don't know. I mean, we did have Batwoman on TV for a little bit, so that was kind of like, okay, we're doing something else, but there's just like, we're stuck. It's like Bruce Wayne. We're stuck at this one point in time. We're anchored here and we cannot move forward. But if we were to move forward, there's all of these great stories that we could tell with these other characters. If we could just move on.
Like let's get past Dick Grayson and Bruce Wayne. There are more characters in the Bat universe than those two. So it's like, I want to see Jason Todd. I want to see Tim Drake. I want to see Damian Wayne. I want to move on. So we kind of got into a Batman discussion instead of a Flash one here. I guess because he's in the Flash movie. But yeah, I am going to watch it. I will say that I recently saw Blue Beetle, and I actually was very excited with that. If you like the DC universe, they do the legacy thing in that movie really effectively, where they talk about like the original Blue Beetle, Dan Garrett, who's kind of like the Jay Garrick era one that like nobody's really heard of. And then they have Ted Kord, who was, Blue Beetle for a really long time, and a lot more people are fans of him. And now they have Jaime Reyes, who's the latest Blue Beetle, and he's the one that the movie focuses on. So it is kind of like that legacy progression, and it felt very much like a DC movie, which was kind of nice. But it also was not like oppressively dark or anything like that either.
That's
like
good.
It had a lot of humor. Like they didn't take a character that's supposed to be light and make him dark. Like it was actually like there were plenty of jokes and stuff, but it also didn't like overwhelm the emotional moments in the movie. So I think that was a really satisfying one. It's done better than The Flash or Shazam 2. Unfortunately, that does not mean that it's done well. So it just means it's done better than those two.
That's better is better, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
That's very dark. Are you from the DC universe? Like Deadpool says. Well, it's good to know that Blue Beetle was, a step in, I guess, the right direction. So that's good.
I mean, it has a couple of those things where you're like, okay, this is kind of like a cliched supervillain origin kind of thing, that they do. So there are some moments that are kind of like predictable as it's like doing the superhero things, but overall, I think they did a really good job of like establishing that he's his own character. And this isn't too much of a spoiler because it's in like the opening credits of the movie, but they do show a little green pulse of light hit the scarab before it hits the earth, which the scarab is what turns Jaime into Blue Beetle. And the director later confirmed, yes, that is a Green Lantern damaging the scarab before it hits the planet, because that's what happens in New 52 is a Green Lantern sees the Blue Beetle scarab entering Earth's atmosphere, and he's like, those dirty things destroy planets. And so like he shoots a beam at it, but he can't, it's like too fast for him. So he just sort of like glances a blow off of it. But it gets to Earth and it's supposed to take over Jaime and make him kill everyone. But because it's been damaged by the Green Lantern, he can control it. So it's
nice.
like, yeah, it's sort of like a different, it's not being used for its intended purpose, basically.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, kind of like Goku was supposed to take over Earth, but instead, well, he wasn't damaged in transit, but he ended up befriending everybody. And then when they come back and they're like, all right, are we ready to, take over these people? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a Saiyan from Earth.
Right.
No, you were sent here to, soften these people up so that we could conquer them. Huh? No, we're friends. Yeah. Well, and
he's also sent to Earth to go around and grab everybody in the crotch, apparently, because that's what he does for Dragon Ball.
As a kid. Yeah, that's true. Well, and so like you mentioned Green Lantern, and we've had these like little teases here and there because I feel like we want to have a Green Lantern movie, but because of the really bad reception that the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern had, we're staying away from it. But I'm really glad that we're staying away from it now, and I hope we stay away from it for a couple more years until we get this really bad CG thing cleared up.
Yes.
Because a Green Lantern movie with like really bad CGI, like today's really bad stuff,
it will not work.
Even if it's the best story and we have great actors and we don't use a CGI skin suit like we did in the previous movie, because that didn't work out very well. But even if we make better decisions, if the CGI is terrible like it has been with a lot of things we've seen, it would just ruin the movie again, and then we won't see any more Green Lantern again. Green Lantern could almost be its own universe because there's so many characters and there's so many different, and even when you go beyond Green Lantern into all the different colors of the emotional spectrum, I mean, that's where it just explodes into, we could do all kinds of different things and have our own multiverse with that. But I mean, even the Flash is kind of like that, where you have all these different, Flash characters, and getting away from Flashpoint, there's still that time travel element of, well, we can use this in small little bursts to sort of affect our story without going into Flashpoint and saying, oh, now we've wrecked the entire timeline and whatever. If he sticks to small little changes that are more recent, then it's not necessarily better, because who knows what you're affecting in the future. But at least for our characters, they're like, well, I don't know what happens, 5 seconds from now. So if I go and change something that happened an hour ago, not my problem, that's somebody else's problem.
Well, there was actually an editorial mandate, I believe, after Flashpoint happened. It might have been even more recent than that, where one of the DC editors was like, no more time travel in Flash comics. Like, we're not doing this anymore. So I don't know if those people are still in charge, if that's still in place, but I know there was a good period of time where they were like, stop using that plot device because we've done it too much, and just like stick to what you're writing and do a coherent story. So like I said, I think that recent Flash run that was, well, I mean, I guess it's like 8 or 9 years old now, from 2016. I know that's very well received. And in fact, the writer that worked on that, I know he sort of became like the event guy for DC, where he's like structuring what the next several events will be for the universe. So he sort of like rose through the ranks by being successful on that book. So I kind of want to read that run because I know that it's pretty highly acclaimed. It starts with introducing the character of Godspeed, though, which I am not a big fan of. I think he's pretty lame.
Like he's all white, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like his
and
outfit.
For some reason, overweight on the CW. Or at least he kind of has the Ben Swallow build going on, where he's like He's
Yeah.
got like kind of thin arms and stuff, and then like the midsection of him is like wide, and I'm like, what are we doing here? This is a little bit odd for somebody that runs super fast. But yeah, he is kind of an underwhelming character, but from what I'm told, that run gets really good later on. So I don't know.
Instead of Godspeed, they should have called him Bod Speed.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm Bod Speed. Yes.
He goes around and kidnaps people and like makes them go to the gym at super speed or something.
Yeah.
I noticed you haven't canceled your Planet Fitness. Why aren't you using it?
Let me run you to the gym. Now get on this treadmill. It never stops and it goes super speed.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that there are so many speedsters within the Flash that I think sometimes I think like, all right, do we need another really fast guy to do stuff? But this story that we read, I know we're still talking about the comic, but it was so good. It really kind of justified everybody having their place and their own thing that they could do. And so I feel like, again, it's just down to the writer. If you've got somebody that can implement it well, then it's cool. If it's like what they did on the CW, where every single season the villain is inexplicably faster than Barry,
and it's a mystery too. Like, we don't know who the mystery speedster is, and then it's like we figured it out. Okay, now there's another mystery speedster.
The future Flash.
Yeah, exactly.
Savitar. Savitar in the comics is like a cult leader that I don't know, he like murders people and steals their speed or something. He's like nothing like what they did on the CW. Although what they did on the CW was like something they did in New 52 with a totally different character, and I don't know, it's a whole mess. But
yeah. Yeah, that was the thing, is like, another mystery. And then they tried to do the same thing on Arrow, where it's like, there's a mystery archer, who is it? And it's like, oh, Merlin has come back from the dead. And it's like, okay, we don't know what to do on either show now. And so we're using the same boring story trope on both. Like,
yeah,
at least they only did it once on Arrow, but it was like, just multiple times on the Flash. And I was like, okay, I can't, like, I guess, if you have a character who's super fast, you have to have a villain for them to fight that can balance that out, because otherwise, if Barry's faster, then he can just thwart the villain before he even blinks. So there's got to be some kind of, but it's like, oh, Barry lost his powers, or he lost his confidence, or he was too cocky because he didn't use his friends. And it's like, we came up with all these like whiny reasons why he couldn't defeat the villain. And then he goes back and now he's got his confidence, or now he's being a little more cautious, or now he's listening to his friends and he's able to just one shot the villain because he, got over that temporary, whatever weak crybaby thing that he was going through. And it's just like, why are we getting so whiny with this?
Even for a genre that relies on a lot of tropes, the show has started to feel very tropey, where it's like, all right, we're just kind of repeating the expected thing, and it feels like the writers are going, that's good enough, let's print that, let's just get one out. And I don't know, it can be done well. I don't think that every Star Trek show in the 90s had a perfect track record for cranking out 25 episodes per season, but they would usually have a good 10 to 15 of them are solid, if not really good. And then maybe you've got some mixed in there that are like, this is one I usually skip when I rewatch. It's the one where Janeway and Paris turn into lizards. All right, let's skip that one. But
the thing about Star Trek, though, is all of those episodes that are like eye roll episodes and whatever are great material for Lower Decks.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. So Did you see the Voyager episode of Lower Decks that they did?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and you had mentioned the lizards, and that's what brought that to mind. But then they used the a la Moraine and count to 10. They used that in the latest episode, and there was they used that thing from TNG that was like the colony that looks like it's from Gundam, that's like a big circle, and the supercomputer, and it's like, it's so funny because they can use all of that stuff that was weird. And we don't talk about those episodes. Well, Lower Decks is like, oh, we not only talk about those episodes, but we make them actual story points that like are relevant to what's going on. It's like,
Mhm.
that's very creative
The
and
Voyager
funny.
one was so satisfying because they pulled such deep lore out, like the Fear Clown and
Yeah,
Michael Sullivan. Like
yeah.
those are
He's like,
those
I miss my wife. And I'm like, oh, delete the wife.
are yeah, such like specific references. And I was like, man, and they're what they were keeping all these artifacts on the ship from Voyager's voyage. But of course, the stuff they ran into almost every week was like horrendously dangerous. So everything there
Hmm.
can kill them. And the macro virus, they brought that back too.
Yeah.
That was another one
And then it got assimilated by the Borg and
by the
became like a
Borg.
giant nanite. And it was like, okay, now this is getting, it was ridiculous. And now it's just like blown up into even more ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then the solution was to use the same thing that Neelix did, which was he made the cheese that got in the air ventilation system and infected the bioneural gel packs.
Yes.
And that's how we got rid of the nanite virus that had merged with the macro virus. And it's like, okay, we've taken all the weird things and just like smushed them together.
It was very clear that they watched and enjoyed Voyager in that episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, that one was so much fun. Yeah, I'm trying to get back to the Flash, but I'm like struggling to find more stuff.
We
to
keep
say
running
about
around to different
the TV
subjects.
series. I mean, I guess the other thing we haven't really addressed with the Flash is Justice League and like the DC animated universe, which that was the Flash, like you said, to me, for as long as I had known. Wally was the guy. I didn't know who Barry was. I didn't grow up with him. And that sort of like wisecracking and never taking the situation seriously and all of that stuff, that was very much what I expected of the Flash. So yeah, that animated series was my only exposure to the character. And it's fascinating to me that for a lot of these movies, they have taken the attitude of like, let's not do the character that people are most familiar with from other media. Let's go back to another, like the Green Lantern movie. They totally could have done Kyle, and I think Ryan Reynolds would have fit his personality a lot better, and then the movie would have worked a lot better instead of making it Hal Jordan. And more people from the 90s grew up reading Kyle, or they could have done Jon Stewart, which, okay, again, more people know him because of the DC animated series. And we know that these shows were well received. I mean, you can go back and watch this stuff now, and it's really not aged badly at all, which is really surprising. But like Batman the Animated Series, which started all of it, is on HBO Max and like HD now. And really, those episodes hold up, honestly. Like the only thing that dates them is that it looks like they're driving 1950s cars, but that was kind of like a stylistic choice.
Yeah.
And that was weird in the 90s anyway. So,
right.
Which that was actually something they did to avoid the censors, because they were like, well, it won't make sense for the bad guys to have laser guns if they're driving these 1950s cars. So we have to give them real guns. And the censors were like, okay, fine, you're right, that doesn't make sense. And that's how they were able to get actual guns into the show. So it was
unlike Superman, where it's like everybody had laser guns, but then at the same time, if you're fighting Superman, you should absolutely be using a laser gun and not wasting bullets. Like if you're shooting at something and you're like, wow, these bullets bounce right off, well, that sucks. You're not just gonna, oh, maybe this one, maybe this one, maybe this one. No, you're like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah,
like
it's time to run away now.
Yeah.
At least Metropolis being the sort of like future city of tomorrow, it makes more sense in that setting. And so I think them establishing Gotham and as kind of this older city and Metropolis is this more modern one, it makes sense in the comics and on those shows to kind of justify how their worlds are different.
Yeah. That really I was going to say,
go ahead.
All of that you just said just really made me think of like seeing Michael Keaton again as Batman. I am so ready for Batman Beyond now. Like, let's do it. It's time. It is time for Batman Beyond, because the way it was done before was like the technology, we had at the time. And with all the advances in technology since then, like we could have a super futuristic Batman show that's just like completely weird and crazy. And we have Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne, and he doesn't have to do all the crazy Batman stuff. He just has to play Bruce Wayne. And we find a good, character to play Terry McGinnis. And maybe we update the future lingo a little bit. Like we have to say Shui and, because that's just like a staple, but like
Yeah.
not make it, like the movies of the 80s where they showed the future, it was like a really weird looking future. And then the 90s kind of carried that tradition. So
the thing that never looks good in any movie when they show it in the future is if they ever show a sporting event, it's always so bizarre and over the top. And like I was watching, what was that show, Sliders, that was on in the 90s. They have like this future version of like volleyball crossed with soccer that they're playing, and I'm just like, this is so dumb. Like, I don't know what you guys are doing. And they have something similar on Batman Beyond. There's episodes where they have like school sporting events, and it's got to be some futuristic version of basketball where they like use rackets or something, and they have anti-gravity, and it's just like, what is happening?
But why would that change? Like,
right,
technology
like,
changes, and the way we do things, but like that's the thing that they chose to change to
yeah,
differentiate it. But I mean, at the same time, they didn't like know that cell phones were going to explode and everybody was going to have a computer, in their hand and be able to film a sporting event as it's happening, and FaceTime and all of that stuff. But we can use that now. Like, football is football, or soccer is soccer, or whatever.
Yeah.
But the way that it's being filmed, the way that it's being watched, the way that people are interacting with it maybe is what's different, instead of let's combine and use rackets and anti-grav and all kinds of weird stuff. But that was the future back then.
there's another, this is a complete tangent, but there's another, it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, I think it's The Running Man, where they have some kind of weird like extreme hockey sport that's in that, and there's a guy named Sub-Zero that goes around hitting people with his racket. And it's, if you're ever really just have no better way to kill 2 hours, I guess watch that movie. But it's pretty bad. But it's another one of those like, look at the future sports, and what is happening here?
Did you see that ludicrous display last night?
Exactly. The problem with Arsenal is they always try to walk it in.
I don't even know what that means.
And see, when people say Arsenal, all I think of is Roy Harper. So I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, the animated Justice League, I think, did a really good job with the Flash, and they showed the episode I really remember where they showed him as like, he's both kind of an idiot, but he's also like a great character, is when they put Jon Stewart on trial. And he's getting up there and he's just like killing time on the stand to like give them time to like find evidence. And he says some of the dumbest stuff up there. He's like, what about ipso facto and habeas corpus? And like, he's just like making up stuff. And
it's like on Legally Blonde, where she gets up there and she's like, okay, I want to talk about, habeas corpus, and I want to talk about this. And the judge is like, I get it, but why aren't you, doing this? Like, I know what that stuff means. But yeah, he's up there just like spewing stuff just to stall for time.
Yeah. But at the same time, he's doing it to like save his friend. So it's like, that's the motivation.
It was for a good reason.
Exactly.
But he was kind of like more friends, I think, with Green Arrow, because they were sort of the like quippy, sarcastic type, where they would tell a joke and be the punchline in something that was going on, and then they would go do their superhero thing. So I never really saw him as more friends with like Hal Jordan Green Lantern, who's like very more serious, or Barry Allen, who seems to be a lot more serious than any of those characters. So
well, and so 90s JLA has Wally West as the Flash, and then Kyle Rayner as Green Lantern. So they're the two youngest members of the team. So they're naturally going to bond. They're like checking out chicks together, and they're constantly like cracking jokes and stuff like that. The Plastic Man is in there too, but he gets a little too wacky for them, so I don't know if they're like really with him. He's also an ex-con, so everybody has like a thing against him because you used to be a criminal, there's always that thing. But yeah, like it makes more sense for Wally and Kyle to be friends because they both have that kind of like happy-go-lucky personality, whereas yeah, like Wally with Hal doesn't really make as much sense. So I don't know. Of course, I guess Jon Stewart was kind of more the straight man on the Justice League animated show, because he was like, I'm the military guy, like I'm gonna get the job done because I'm Phil Lamar,
Yeah. Like he's
So,
a really cool character, and like
mhm,
it seems like, you know, we have again all of these characters that we could be highlighting, but we're hiding
mhm,
behind the name of the superhero identity, but we
right.
need to be showcasing the characters more so
Yeah,
than the superhero. And again with Batman, like all the different actors that we've had that have played Batman, we
mhm,
could have somehow chalked that up to some sort of legacy thing of, you know, these are
sure,
different people all taking up the mantle or the cowl, or, you know, in this case.
sure.
But like with Doctor Who, because Doctor Who's a really great example of, we
Mhm,
have one character and it actually is the same character, but every time we have a different actor play that character, there's a story reason why it's a different actor, because they
right.
go through regenerations, and, you know, the personality shifts, but the core of the character stays the same. So every actor is totally open to interpreting that core however they want to and displaying it and being their own character, instead of like, okay, you know, I'm going to go play James T. Kirk in a
Right.
movie. Well, you know, I don't want to replicate William Shatner, but I'm still stuck because I have to portray Kirk in a very certain way.
Yeah,
Whereas it's like, okay, let's go to a time period where maybe we don't know any of the captains or the crew, and have a
right.
new captain that can really be
Mhm,
anything that we want it to be. But
yeah.
I feel like in the last, you know, like 2010 to 2020, or well, I guess
Mhm,
including up to the last couple of years, we've been stuck in this, you know, everything was great in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And now we just need to repeat that again and everything will be fine. And like we had a
yeah,
lot of the like reboots
yeah.
or remakes of old classics, and some of them were good, some of
Mhm,
them were really not good. And some of them
yeah,
were like, okay, that was, you know, interesting to see, but it wasn't really, you know, amazing. But it's like, okay, can we please get back on track of like either
yeah,
creating original things or at least using the other stuff besides the mainstream? It's like these
right.
top 10 things were the best selling, so we're only going to tell stories about them and nothing else. Like, well, the
Yeah,
rest of these characters are interesting, and actually are more interesting to some of us than the main characters.
right. Well, and it's kind of like going to a concert where they only play the hits, but they're never going to do anything new. And it's like after
Yeah.
a while, you do get to the point where you're like, okay, well, now I do want to hear you do something new. Like I've heard this before because I listened to that CD 400 times, and I've already kind of run it into the ground. So like, what else you got? It
Yeah.
would be nice to stop just playing the hits and actually move on to something that we
Right.
haven't seen before. So,
Right. Well,
well,
hopefully we don't do that on this podcast. We try to stay new and fresh. And even if we, you know, repeat a character that we've reviewed before, we pick a story that's very different
mhm,
and, you know, try to maybe give a different perspective on it that hasn't been, you know, told by every other comic book podcast out there. But we
right.
don't care about them. You tune in to listen to us, and we appreciate you as listeners and
That's
viewers. So,
right. Thanks everybody for watching. I guess that's going to be it for the after show, unless you've got anything else.
nope, I'm going to
For
run out of
watching
here.
the Flash,
Oh,
Green
wait, no, I'm
Lantern,
sorry.
DC animated universe, Batman, Star Trek after show. Um,
I'm going at super speed.
and I too am going at super speed, and I'm also falling, and my
See, I
earpiece
have a
fell out
couch,
too.
so I can just scoot over here, and now
Yeah, I
I'm out.
can't. I'm in a chair. I guess I could roll the chair over. Here goes the Flash.
Turn. Ah, just don't fall.
The red blur.
The red blue blur. Oh yeah, on Smallville.
The
Uh,
the
that wasn't
wizard.
the Flash though. That was Superman, but still.
Yeah, what did they call him at first on the Flash? Because there was something cheesy that Iris was calling him at first. It seems like the blur or the wizard or something. I don't
Yeah,
know. I can't
maybe it was
remember what it
just
was.
the blur.
Yeah.
Maybe it was something like that. But yeah, Superman, it was the red blue blur on Smallville. I think, or maybe it was the blur and then it was the red blue blur or something like that. But it was
Yeah.
just like, you know, that was an interesting show too, because it's like, we want to see Superman, and they're like, no, you're not going to see Superman,
No, no,
sorry.
we'll do 10 seasons, but you won't see Superman.
But we did see Green Arrow and Aquaman and I think Cyborg, and we
Yeah,
saw a bunch of like early iterations of
believe
characters
it
on
or
that
not,
show.
Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle shows up late in the run of that show too, because I
Wow.
saw a still of it online somewhere, and they were like, "This is actually not the first live action portrayal of
Hmm.
that character," and I was like, "Really?" So yeah, apparently they
Uva
did hit
Vitu
on
no.
Smallville too. I know. All right.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to this
Flash
after
out.
show. We will flash you out of here.
We'll
Wait,
flash you
no,
later.
that's not what that means. There we go. Flash you later.
Comic. Boneless Comic Podcast.
Boneless Comic Podcast.